Project Shoreline is an exploration-y, platformish cleaning simulator made by Spelldoser Interactive in Unity Engine. It's a pretty simple concept. You play as a fish-mouse creature called Murray, and your job is to clean up the shoreline. It's got a cartoony art style which is easy on the eye, bright colours and smooth animation. There's a drawn loading screen which sometimes freezes or lags a bit, but it's minimal impact and the game loads in pretty quickly. In order to clean effectively, the game gives you a brief tutorial on using your water gun. It's left mouse to spray water, which is animated as a sprinkling kind of motion, but it spreads wide, and is quite effective. Then it shows you there's a right mouse to aim option, which turns it into a jet spray to get rid of tougher dirt and crystals that can form. That's the extent of the mechanics, short of jumping and running. In the settings menu, there are various aim and shoot options to control the spray. You've got dynamic, toggle, and hold options on each of them. The aim mode defaults to dynamic and the firing to hold as default. Dynamic presumably changes between toggle or hold depending on what you're cleaning, but I found it tricky to test this fully. Toggle does as it says. If you click left mouse once, it will fire consistently until you click again. Same for the aim mode. If you click hold, you have to hold left or right mouse for as long as you aim and shoot. I would recommend playing on toggle for the firing mode, since there's so much to clean you're going to get a sore hand holding down the button so much. For aiming it doesn't matter much either way since there are only a handful of scenarios where you really need it. It's good that they give an option either way, though I don't think it would hurt to have toggle as the only option on the firing mode. Once you get to the main game area it shows you a pan of the area. I didn't really connect at first, but the locations it shows you are the most important ones, and there are signs leading you in their direction. Your aim is to get to a platform over a stretch of water, which it shows you, and you can only do that by cleaning those specific large things. There are a lot of things to clean other than those, however, but essentially those are optional bonus content. On completion, the game tells you how much completion you managed, so you know if you've missed anything. You can go back into the game and keep playing for full completion even after the end if you want, but that leads into an issue. Basically, it's almost impossible at the later end of completion to find out what you haven't done if you didn't do it right the first time. I finished with 73% completion the first run, then went back to try and get full. I found an area I hadn't done, which was pretty obvious since there was a ton I'd missed, and there were a few other bits I'd missed which I swore I'd already done but could have confused. That took me up to 97.7%. Then I did a full lap around the place and couldn't find anything. There's no percentage indicator during play to tell you if you have any more to do before you finish. Whilst it's not the end of the world because you can finish after, it would be nice to know where you're at. If you do want to check, you have to keep pulling in and out of the game menu to see it. I think it would be better to have that indicator during play. You could argue that it encourages exploration to make people have to check for sure that they've not missed anything, but you have to explore anyway to find the stuff to clean, so I don't think that would devalue that aspect of it. I did manage to 100% it on a second run, and that's because I made sure to thoroughly watch everything I was cleaning to make sure it was done. The game does well to give you indicators. For example, when you clean something it will give you a ping when it's done and the object will flash white. You get a burst of sparkles as well. You also get a burst of new grass and foliage when you complete areas of general cleaning, which is another sign. The areas uncleaned are normally beige, grey kind of colours, but they get a splash of colour once you complete them, so you know if you've cleaned a bunch and nothing pops up, you may have missed something. You'd think that would make it quite obvious, but that new foliage doesn't appear in every area you clean, and it might not be easy to figure out that trend at first. In some places you get a lot of small objects in a similar space, so you get bombarded with pings and flashes, which is satisfying to the brain like jingling keys, but it's very hard to distinguish which bits are flashing and which bits you might have missed amongst the chaos. I had to run around all of it twice at least in those kind of areas, just in case anything was missed, because it was too much to keep track of. The other thing is that objects need cleaning on all angles. This varies depending on the object. A lot of them are very open, so it's not an issue to clean all sides, but some rocks have short angles that are close to a wall, or some dirt can be between a collection of objects, and it can be easy to miss those little bits. Usually you have to clean around 80 to 90% of an object for it to be considered complete, so if you get all the other sides, sometimes it doesn't matter about that small part. But sometimes it won't complete unless you get those bits, and unless you scour every inch of the map, it's going to be very hard to spot those. If you want 100% completion, you pretty much have to do it right the first time. It seems that the larger the object, the less of it you have to have sprayed for it to be completed, and whilst the spray is broad and can cover off the smaller stuff quite quickly, it's also the little stuff that's easier to catch you out. The counter for this would probably be to group up small objects in close proximity and only have them flash and ping if you've completed the group. For the smaller stuff, maybe if the object has any short sides to be cleaned or if there's dirt in a crack between objects, it's worth making it a smaller proportion to clean to make it complete. You may ask what the incentive for getting 100% completion is. To be honest, there isn't really much other than the satisfaction of completion and making the place look nicer. You don't get a different ending, the same cutscene happens, and it says 100% on the end card. I'd make a reasonable bet that anyone interested in a cleaning sim would get satisfaction from things being fully clean, so there's not a ton of risk from this I don't think due to their targeted player base. And the option to be able to work for it after completion is good for completionists and for playtime. But I mentioned before there are key objects to get the lily pads to get to the end, so you can actually just clean those and that's the game done. On my thorough playthrough, it took me an hour to fully clean and do a recap of the entire area to make sure nothing was missed. You can unlock a time trial version after completing it once, in which I only cleaned the key parts. That took me 11 minutes. So as you can see, it can knock a minimum of half an hour off the playtime to only do the essentials. The key parts are only 35% of the total cleaning, which is a pretty big chunk of game content to be able to roll straight over. It could be frustrating to force 100% completion to get full game completion, but I think for the big objects it would be worth adding some of the surrounding area as part of the necessary bits to clean up to the amount needed so you can get a bit more juice out of your gameplay, even if you try and take the easy way out. There are little hedgehog dog things that run around which you can also clean. I have no idea if the hedge dogs count towards the total score, because they also hide in the grass and can be hard to spot. I don't think they do, which makes sense, but they sound happy and start following you if you clean them. It would be a bit mean for someone to be almost done and then have to hunt for them around the map just to complete it. It's a very nicely designed game. Like I said, it's simple and colourful, but whilst most is grass, rocks and trees, it's also very varied in that there's a bit of beach, some waterfalls and rock pools, a dark area with glowing mushrooms, bamboo shoots and coral. The objects are abstract and interesting to look at, and there are varieties in things to clean to keep it varied, from the simple dark coating on rocks and objects, to goopy stuff that's a bit tougher, the crystals, and some electric goop that grows back, sticks your feet and tries to make you fall. The sound effects are pleasing and good for indication, fitting in most cases, though the noise for jumping on a coral pillar is both loud and random, sounds more like a bouncy thing than what it should be. You climb up and down bits, so it's a dynamic landscape, and it is good to encourage exploration. Now for some points to note. You can explore a lot of places, including places you're not really meant to. This is because you can jump onto any angled surface and get purchase. This means you can do a Skyrim and jump your way to the top of a mountain up a near vertical slope, because paths are for babies and you want a route with some chest hair. Some slopes are considered smooth, and if you hit those, you'll lock into a slide and slide down to the bottom without being able to jump off and regain any height until you're at the bottom, or until you hit another ledge. You can't exploit this to get to the end. Trust me, I tried. But you can exploit it to run to the edge of the map. They seem to have considered this, however, and around the edge of the mountains there is a small ledge of water. If you hit water in this game, you respawn, which kind of solves the issue. I tested a flat edge of the map to see if it would let me fall forever, and it didn't. It also treated me as if I hit water and respawned me. What I would say is that, despite this prevention, it's a bit of an immersion break. It's probably a better idea to just invisible wall the top edge of the mountains to stop people getting that far in the first place. Speaking of the water, it's kind of ironic that an animal that's part fish dies instantly in water. Even if it's a toe's worth that you make contact with, it can kick you back. Oh, unless it's a rock pool, in which case you can stand in it all day and there's no problem. Make your mind up, game. Can I dip my toes or not? Or am I just highly allergic to salt water? You can play this game with controller, and it plays quite nicely once you sort the settings. It rumbles whenever water is sprayed, which is pretty much all the time, making the experience more akin to a 45-minute hand massage than anything else. Whilst it's nice to have rumble, I think it's better saved for cleaning completion rather than whenever water is sprayed, since it would give me a break from having my hand bones rattled every now and again. It might feel hollower without the feedback, but you don't get that feedback on mouse and keyboard, so again, I don't think it's a detriment. As I usually mention in Unity games, the camera bumps. This is an eternal issue, and they've countered it in part by fading the character model and environment via pixels to prevent you seeing into your own brain. Whilst it is a nice counter, I found that there are a lot of places where the bump can cause a bit of a pain, particularly when I was doing my 100% run. I played that one with controller, and I don't know if it's because I was slower to rotate the camera that I noticed it bumping more, but especially in the coral areas where there's lots of bits and pieces around, and the cave with the mushrooms, there were times where I'd try getting in a space, and that would make the camera jump. I'm not sure how to counter this, short of leaving the camera zoomed out and making the object transparent if it would be in front of the camera, instead of trying to get the camera in front of the object, or disappearing the object completely. That way you might keep object permanence but not have to get a bouncing view of yourself. The reason you have to get tight into some spaces is firstly because of the reach from the spray, which is fairly far but also sprinkly, so sometimes you have to get closer and more direct to clean bits, but also because the firing direction is the direction you're facing. So if your camera is forward and you turn right, you fire right. You can't strafe right and fire forwards unless you're in aiming mode, since that locks your view ahead. This is a decent counter to what could be a problem, but especially in the coral area, the objects were too close together to use the aiming mode for the whole thing. I was having to swing my aim up and down for miles for the tall objects, but the aim mode spray was too precise for the small objects, so yes, I could flick between them, but then I'd have to weave in and out of the objects to position myself, which caused all the bumping. Again, hard to counter unless you spread the objects out, or attach the aim to the camera rather than the player direction on normal fire mode. To counter myself again, I did an eagle eye view for a lot of the controller play, perhaps to counter the bumping, so there is risk that linking the camera to the view will force the viewing angle lower down, and therefore make it more likely to bump, since you're looking over the character's shoulder. But spreading out some of the objects a little more might counter that as well. It's a tricky problem to solve, I appreciate, since it seems to just be a feature of the engine. Most games get around this by having wide areas and paths, so there's never much need to put your back to a wall. There are also some small elements of clipping, like the aim mode jet spray clipping through the edge of rounded objects, some coral clipping into each other, and crevices showing dead ends of environment objects, but these aren't major visual flaws. The only other thing is that because your character can get a grip on small ledges, they can also knock their head on small ledges, so you can sometimes get stuck on things you don't think you should get stuck on whilst you're climbing, and have to move and try jumping again. There are a lot of good features to this game. Simple to play, visually and auditorily appealing, with a background that feels alive. Playtime is variable depending on how keen you are for completion, and there are a lot of nice environments and colours to reward you for cleaning well also. If you like a relaxing game, this game sets the vibe nicely. The background music is calming, though there is only one track so it might get samey. It would have been nice to mix it up a little bit. Replayability could be found from the time trials, and whilst camera bump can be a little loopy in places and there are some optimizations that could be made with the environment and controls, the game itself is pretty solid and a nice chill experience. A good effort from the handful of people that made it, and a casual way to spend an hour of your time. I will give Project Shoreline an 8.5 out of 10.